These heresiarms actually came from my students in that one year my students collected sayings I kept pounding in their heads and presented me with a copy at the end of the year. And to that end, and Kim, was that your class that did that?
No, it was you before us.
The year before you. So here we go. 40 words of wisdom. The first word of wisdom is, now folks, on your tables you have fill in the blanks and you also have a Go Tags pen. And I tested every one of those little rascals this morning to make sure they write. So it's a pen on one end, a highlighter on the other. Please take that as my gift to you, and to remind you of a program that will soon be available. You will not have to come to Peabody and take a class with me. You will not have to be at a workshop with one of my 60-plus certified workshop developers. The book, Getting Off to a Good Start, will be available for purchase. Enough of that. A teacher on the feet is worth 5 on the seat. Folks, my first year of teaching, first period was 48th graders. And I promise you, I kept a desk, a chair, something between me and them at all times. If I'd had a whip and a chair, I would have done. What I did not realize was the power of physical presence. And I encourage you, and those of you who work with student teachers, encourage them to get out from behind the desk. You feel it? The physical presence as the person walks, whoever the teacher is, comes near. Yes, physical presence. The kid in the back of the room, do not let that child be deprived of your physical presence. Share it with all of them. Number 2 is make visible your invisible expectations. I promise you, I used to tell my students, I have not passed Mind Reading 101. If it's not in the paper, I don't know that you meant it. The fact is, our students have never passed Mind Reading 101 either. And part of the thing about making visible your invisible expectations is to stop and think, what is it I really expect? And starting there, move forward and think about how can I communicate this to my students. Because often what we said wasn't what kids heard. Anybody besides me ever had the experience that you gave a wonderful set of directions and you looked out and saw 3 different interpretations of what you thought you said? Yeah. So make it visible first to yourself and then to your students. Number 3, I'd like to give you my definition of a teacher. Teacher is a professional decision maker. Some of the studies say that we make upwards of 100 decisions every day. And by the way, you ever have anyone ask you what you do and you say, I'm a teacher, and they go, a teacher? Why would you want to be a teacher? I tell my students to smile, look them square in the eye and say, I know, it's a small thing. All I want to do is shape minds and influence lives. What do you want to do? Number 3, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. Now, this is a quote from Henry Ford, and I want you to think a moment, not of yourself, but of your students. So many of our children come into our classrooms having been told by parents, peers, teachers, they're dumb, they can't learn. One of the first things we must do is to begin to get an image in our mind of the potential of this child, and then hold this target up to the child so they can begin to see where they can aim and what they can be. One of our first requirements is to teach children that we believe they can. Now, when calling for student responses, what do we typically do when we ask a question in the class? Think of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Anyone? Anyone? Yeah? Anyone? No. When calling for student responses, you want to ask, wait, and randomly designate. You want to ask the question of all students and give them a little bit of time to think. Studies indicate the average teacher wait time in the United States is 3/5 of a second. If a child has not at least given us an we usually do what? This means anybody call out. This means I'll call on you. Kids call this the gun. Harris has got the gun. Anybody call? What do we usually do when a child doesn't give us an answer?
Call on someone else.
Call on someone else, which communicates to the first kid, honey, I don't think you can figure it out if I work with you. Think about it. What the studies show. In classrooms where kids are more willing to participate and give higher orders of responses, the teacher asks everyone, allows 3 to 5 seconds of wait time, and then randomly designates a student. Now, let's do something just a moment about the 3 to 5 seconds. I want you to say this with me. Listen first. Ask, wait, randomly designate. With me. Ask, wait, randomly designate. Again. Ask, wait, randomly designate. Now, we're going to wait 3 seconds before we randomly designate. With me. Ask, wait, randomly designate. Try it again. Ask, wait, randomly designate. It feels long, doesn't it? But studies show if we will do that, more students will raise a hand to reply. And the replies that we get will be at a higher level of thinking. Now, regarding randomly designate, who in here uses equity cards? Equity cards. Just a little 3x5 card. Each card has every student's name on it. You ask a question. While you're waiting, you shuffle the cards, and you pick one. And you can keep a little record if you wish. I would use 1 week red pen, next week green pen, check, minus, plus how the student responded. And I can very quickly see by shuffling through who has and has not responded. I learned about those from the teacher next door to me, best teacher I've ever known, David Brown Parrish. I walked by his classroom one day, and his students, who were also my students, were paying better attention to him than they did to me. And I was jealous. And I wanted to know, what secret does this man have? So I stood to the side and watched. And he pulled up this little set of 3x5 cards. And he asked a question of everyone, and he shuffled the cards, and he picked one. And I went back and I copied. Funny thing, all I had to do was pick up those cards, and everybody sat up straighter in their chairs. Think about it. Harris says in number 6, prevention is better than punishment. Folks, I really encourage proactive classroom management. So many things we can do at the beginning of the year. For example, in the way we set up our classroom. Can we make eye contact with every student easily? Can we easily walk and stand by every student? Even if we don't, they feel like we could. Or our material, what can we do to prevent? Do we have a kid seated with a gerbil cage? No, it'll drive the gerbil crazy. Look for ways. Oh, you had that kid too. I promise you, go into your classroom and ask, where is my competition? How many things in here could get in the way? Analyze and neutralize. Number 7, the number 1 reason students will challenge a teacher is if they perceive the teacher is unfair. Now, I didn't say you are unfair. I said if they perceive you are unfair. Number 1 cause of this is when teachers confuse and smush together rules, procedures, and goals. Quick story. Bubba. About this tall, curly brown hair, big blue eyes, never shut up. Could have killed him. Cutest little kid, looked like a living Care Bear. But one day, I was trying to have a class discussion. And Bubba once again called out without raising his hand, and I nailed him, and he looked at me and he said, "You're not fair." I was brave that day. I said, "Bubba, how am I not fair?" He said, "Well, you know, Carlene calls out sometimes. You never fuss at her. And I call out and you get on my case." And I thought about it, and Bubba was right. Now, the fact is, I had a rule that said raise your hand and wait to be called on? But that wasn't what I always wanted. Sometimes when we had a good class discussion going, I could direct it with a nod of my head. And certainly if they were working in small groups, I didn't expect them to raise their hand and wait to be called on. Now, you know, there are some students who seem to know by osmosis when to raise a hand and when not to, and when to get up and sharpen a pencil and when not to. Do you know what we call these students when they grow up? Teachers. And we forget, because we figured it out by osmosis, we sort of think our kids do too, but not that many grow up to be teachers. Actually, Carlene grew up to be a teacher. I don't know what Bubba grew up to be, but I'm sure he kept it fair. I had to rethink my rule and had to go back and rewrite, and the rule I came up with was talk at appropriate times using appropriate voice and language. And then I had to teach what was appropriate in the different situations. The typical adolescent, you know them, don't you? The typical adolescent would rather be thought cool than a fool, which means if a student is about to be put in a situation where they feel like they're going to look stupid in front of their peers, they're not going to be successful, they would much rather act out and try to be sent out than risk embarrassment. Our adolescent students are so afraid, not so much of physical harm, but of emotional harm. So think about that. If a kid seems to be painted into a corner in a no-win situation, you can just kind of expect it. How can we avoid painting him into that corner? This goes along with that one. It's really hard for a kid to do a behavior he's never seen. Imagine with me for a moment, go back into that most painful of all academic ages, middle school. Now let's go, what at least for me was that painful all classes, gym class. We walk in and we're in our little outfits, and the teacher comes in and says, today we're going to play tennis. Now you've heard the word, but you've never seen the game. How do you feel? Does your stomach hurt? You need to go see the nurse? Change the scenario. You've got a big brother, and he plays tennis, and you have watched him play. Now how do you feel? A little bit better? Change the scenario. Last weekend, he took you with him out to the park, and he taught you how to serve a ball over the net. Now how do you feel? Ready to go. Folks, we often walk into our classrooms and we say, in this classroom we will show respect for one another. And the kid really doesn't have in his head the image of what goes together for what you have in yours. Consider the idea of when you're teaching your rules, have students role play little mini scenarios so they know what it's going to look like and what it's going to feel like. We have a rule that says we will show respect to one another. Could two of you go to the door and show me what respect looks like when both people want to get through at the same time? Could three people come up and demonstrate, one of you is talking with me and each of the other wants to be next? What would that look like, sound like, feel like? Let them see what it is you want them to do and give them the opportunity to practice it in some way. Certainly, I hope we practice some of our lectures before we get up and give them. Asking, are there any questions, is really a check for bravery. In American society, are there any questions is a closure. Are there any questions? No? Good. Thank you. And you ask, are there any questions? And the kid who has a question is sitting there thinking, I'm not going to look stupid in front of them. Plus, I'm not going to draw this thing. Folks, if you really want to know if your kid's got it or not, let me offer this one to you. So, what are you wondering? Try it on with me. Come on. So, what are you wondering? Come on, try it again. Let it, feel it roll around in your mouth. So, what are you wondering? And then you wait 3 to 5 seconds. If you will ask, what are you wondering? It's much more emotionally safe to be wondering something than I have a question. You will get some feedback, especially if you'll give it 3, 5, 6 seconds of wait time. So if you don't take anything else from this today, take this one with you.